Okay, so here's the sled that I use. And we're going to talk about each one of these pieces and parts, what they do, and how they all come together to give us a very accurate cutting sled. So starting with the base, this is a piece of MDF core that has solid surface material mounted on the top and the bottom. And this was actually a display piece in my local hardware store that they were throwing away. And I asked if I could have it. They said sure. So what I like about it, again, the MDF core doesn't move too much, so we don't have to worry about expansion and contraction. Being that it had the solid surface laminates on the top and bottom allows it to slide very easily, but also allows the wood that's on top to slide very easily. So you'll see some writing on here and a few extra holes. That was just there when I got it, but again, for a substrate to build our base off of, I think it's perfect. Of course, you could always use plywood. You could use standard MDF. You don't have to have the solid surface material on here. You could always add it if you wanted to. Another good thing that you could use is actually a seat cut out from a solid surface countertop. Whenever they cut out for the sink opening, or say a range stovetop opening, you might could get that piece from, again, a local hardware store, or if you know a contractor or something. So tons of options for using for a base here. So the next part that we're going to talk about is the fence system right here. And of course, this is a very important part because that controls your accuracy. Now this one is adjustable, and you know, you could certainly make a sled that is set at exactly, in this case, say 15 degrees, and that's going to give you a 12-sided bowl. You could do that and you know, be done with it. I chose to go ahead and make a adjustable fence because I wanted to have just one sled here that will do everything. In the past, I've made, you know, sleds that are set at 15 degrees, 22.5 degrees, whatever particular degree that I needed for that project. Problem is, I started accumulating a lot of sleds. So I decided to look at each one of those sleds, figure out what I liked about them, and then incorporate them all into this sled. And let me say that of all the sleds I've made, I constantly improve them. I constantly, you know, add new features to them. So this sled here works for me now, but in another, you know, who knows, week, month from now, I'll probably come across a project or a problem that I have to modify this one to make. And once I modify it so many times, I'll decide just to go ahead and make a new one and start over. So it's always a work in progress. So hopefully by you guys watching this, you know, it'll give you ideas that you may want to add to your sled, and you may do something completely different. So getting back to the fence, again, it's just a piece of plywood here. Again, to keep it very rigid, very straight. Hopefully it's not going to move on me too much. We have the central bolt here, and this is your pivot point. Now, coming over onto this side, we have two bolts. This one allows for a little bit of play so that this slide mechanism here can work. Again, this is all plywood. I just took a table saw and kind of did a couple of little cuts here to make me a clearance for the bolt. So we can go from 0 all the way up to, let's say 22.5, 25 degrees. Now, what I used to attach these bolts here, all these bolts down, are the spiked, I've always called them T-nut style fasteners, that you simply drill a through hole from the bottom, you put them in the hole and you hammer them in, and the spikes grab into the wood. Pick them up any hardware store, they're very cheap, like 10-15 cents a piece, so it's not a big deal. So what I did was I added a series of these, so I can loosen this bolt completely, slide the whole apparatus up and drop into this hole, or come on up even further and drop into another hole, so I can get a very steep angle. Now, you're not going to use an angle this steep for making bowls, but on down the road you may have to do a very sharp miter on something else, or if you get into multi-laminate style pieces, those require some fairly steep cuts to do that. So it's pretty adjustable, as you can see. Again, we have a very simple stop here, just a piece of plywood, again with a bolt through another one of those T-nuts from the bottom. A curve cut through the center that allows full adjustability. And again, I've got 2 locations to mount this to maximize, the length of segment piece that I can get out of it. Coming up here, we have a toggle clamp. Very important piece of equipment here. This is not only for accuracy, but also for safety. And again, a bolt with a T-nut here, fully adjustable, so back and forth, and it also can pivot left and right, depending on where it needs to clamp down at. So not only does this keep our fingers out of the way and hold the piece down, but once we come past our, we'll actually go like this, but once we come past our fence here, there's nothing holding this piece down. So our toggle clamp will allow us to hold that piece down and keep it from kicking away. Not only that, it keeps it at that exact 15-degree angle so that the saw cut is 15 degrees. It's not going to want to wobble on us and get a half a degree off, or like I said, just chew the piece up and throw it across the garage. Got a handle here. This was a, you can pick up these handles again at pretty much any hardware store. And what we have here, this is actually a pretty important piece, so try not to forget this. Just a scrap piece of wood, but what it does is it keeps the whole thing square, because we're cutting almost all the way through this sled, as you can see. So this acts as a bridge to keep the front of this from wanting to bow in and out. Now it's riding in the runners of the table saw, so it shouldn't do that, but a little overkill doesn't hurt. And besides, when you take it out of the table saw and you store it somewhere, you don't want it racking on you and possibly breaking through this these few inches that are holding it together.